Great. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Piper O'Keefe, and I am the designated federal official for the Department of Energy's 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board. I want to welcome everyone to today's meeting, and once again, want to remind folks that this meeting is being recorded. Additionally, I would like to take the time to thank the speakers who will be joining us later this afternoon for taking the time to be with us and share their valuable insights. Finally, I'm excited to welcome the members of the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board. We have an exciting agenda today. Please note that we will do our best to stick to the times outlined in the agenda. We will be tracking time for each presentation and will let the group know when time is almost up. Copies of all meeting materials and public comments will be available on the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board's website. I posted the link to the webpage in the chat, or I will post the link to the website in the chat as soon as I'm finished with these remarks. I would like to add that only members of the Energy Workforce Advisory Board and certain members of DOE may ask questions of presenters. You will notice that, according to FACA, we will maintain a public comment period, which will take place at 1:15 p.m. For members of the public requesting time to make a public comment, please limit your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. For those public commenters who have not pre-registered, please send an email to me before the public comment window at ewab@hq.doe.gov. If there are any members of the press, we welcome you. If you have any questions for our speakers, please contact them directly. For questions for DOE staff, please reach out to me via email outside of the meeting. Now, I need to mention the EWAB meeting minutes. As per FACA, a summary of this meeting will be prepared and made available within 90 days of the meeting. This summary will include a description of the matters discussed and any conclusions reached by the committee. As I noted earlier, in order to maintain an accurate summary, this meeting is being audio and video recorded. I will now take roll call. When I call your name, please repeat your name and organization. Dr. Deanna Ahmed.
Deanna Ahmed, Our Next Energy.
Amanda Cage.
Amanda Cage, National Fund for Workforce Solutions.
Maureen Conway. I believe Maureen will be joining us a little late today. Becky Irvine. Sarita Gupta.
Sarita Gupta, Ford Foundation.
Missy Henriksen.
Missy Henriksen, the Center for Energy Workforce Development.
Chris Levesque.
Chris Levesque from TerraPower.
Dr. Tom Krieger.
Tom Krieger, NAB2.
Dr. Dan Marshall. Oh, Dan, you're on mute.
He's here, but was talking.
Yeah. Okay, Dan, I'll mark you as present and we'll try to get that issue fixed. Anne McMonagle.
Good morning from this coast. Anne McMonagle, the Executive Director of the Apprenticeship Readiness Fund.
Dr. Gerard Melanson.
Gerard Melanson, National Green Jobs Advisory Council.
K7. I believe K7 is not able to join us today. Dr. Jermaine Worrell.
Jermaine Worrell, Augusta Technical College.
And Allison Ziogas.
Hi, Allison Ziogas, Orsted Americas Inc.
Great, thank you all. And now this meeting has begun. And I will pass it over to Maya to give a brief welcome.
Thanks, Piper, and thanks everyone for making the time today for this call. I also want to thank the Berkeley Labor Center, Pam and Francisco, for helping to prepare and execute this call. Okay, so just quickly the objectives for the day. We will be discussing the subcommittee and report writing work plans. Pam will facilitate a discussion about the document that Piper sent yesterday. Our aim with that document was to lay out key components of the report and the EWAB's directives from Congress. to be spread across the subcommittees so that there is some degree of clear tasks and ownership of different critical topics. I also want to just quickly reiterate that we encourage EWAB members to participate in more than one subcommittee. These lists that we shared are just to get the group started, and please reach out to Piper and myself if you'd like to join an additional subcommittee. After that discussion, we will have 3 presentations from external speakers to help provide members with a better understanding of how DOE leverages national labs related to supporting the energy workforce. As you recall, the statute directs the EWAB to develop a strategy for the department that involves engaging national labs to carry out departmental workforce priorities. And so we wanted to provide you with some insight into what that currently looks like now. We will also have some time for discussion about the EWAB members' leading observations about DOE's current workforce strategy to support the development of the energy workforce. Related to this, Piper did share a document yesterday that aggregated major examples of workforce development investments across the department. Some of these are not anticipating new rounds of funding and were more infusions from recent legislation. Some will, but that was just to give, again, a sense of the array of workforce investments coming out of DOE. We'll also have some time for this, a brief discussion about an effective role for DOE to address current and future energy workforce needs. I want to quickly address the EWAB chair to provide an update. We have selected a chair recommendation for the secretary, and that recommendation is being considered through a process. We anticipate being able to formally announce the chair in the next few weeks. So that's just an update there. With that, I think the next slide just talks about the agenda, which pretty much aligns to those objectives. We will have a public comment section. I don't know presently if there are comments, but perhaps by then there will be. Okay, so with that, I think I can pass it off to Pam for a discussion about the subcommittees and the report plan.
Thanks, Maya. And thanks, everybody. I'm Pam Egan with the UC Berkeley Labor Center, and we have the privilege of supporting DOE's work in supporting all of you in doing your work. So as Maya and Piper said, the agenda gives us about 30 to 35 minutes for you all to discuss the subcommittees, the structure as outlined, and in the document that Piper shared earlier this week, there was an offer of one way to think about structuring your work in terms of getting to the report. And so this is an opportunity for all of you to look at that, decide if that makes sense to you, or if you all are wanting to offer different approaches to those tasks. Okay. Did folks have an opportunity? Oh, let me stop and say, this is our first, I think, WebEx meeting. And so in terms of process, I suggest that folks just unmute themselves and jump in. But if you're having trouble getting into the conversation, since we can't always see everybody's faces, either put something in the chat, say stack in the chat, or want to get into the conversation, or raise a hand. And Maya and Piper, if you would help me sort of monitor for those things, that would be really helpful so that we can make sure everybody gets heard. Okay, great. So did folks have an opportunity to review the document titled Subcommittee and Report Planning Document? Okay. Seeing some yeses and some nods. Okay. So we don't need to necessarily then review those step by step. But are there any comments or questions on the subcommittee background pieces, the pieces from the EWAB's charter, or the important considerations with regard to subcommittees? Okay, great. And there's the document included the list of the subcommittees created, and also a list of the members and a list of the scope of the proposed scope of the subcommittees. Is there discussion from any of you on any of those pieces? particularly probably the scope of the subcommittees, or is that the scope that makes sense for each of the subcommittees?
I think that the scope for just looking at the first subcommittee makes sense. I know that when we had our first meeting, we talked about how other departments may be intersectional to thinking about kind of effectiveness of other, supports that support eliminating barriers to energy employment. Would love to add that to the scope if it's able to be widened a little bit. But that was the only thing that I thought about for that one. And I felt like the others were comprehensive.
Super. And obviously, notes are being taken, so we'll be able to take those down. Other comments on the subcommittees and scopes?
I had a question, not so much a comment. So many of the scope questions or issues that we should be addressing have like a data element or component. Whose responsibility is it to, if the subcommittee identifies like data needs, to dig into that information?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have had some discussion with DOE, and the process that I throw out there for your consideration is that the subcommittees make the data request to DOE and see if DOE or with support of contractors like the Labor Center can provide that data back. And there may be cases in which the answer is we don't have access to that data, and that may end up being something that the subcommittees and the full board chooses to say that's a gap that strategically we need to fill. Piper and Maya, other comments?
I had one comment. It's Chris Levesque. I thought the subcommittee breakdown was really pretty good and showed, follow through on our first meeting discussion, because I think if you look at it, the subcommittee's kind of taken inventory of what what the workforce needs are going to be for the clean energy transition. And then, focuses on barriers, removing barriers to getting people in the workforce. And then kind of does a gap analysis on existing DOE programs. So I don't know, for just coming out of our first meeting, I thought that was a decent structure to get us started.
Super. Other comments or questions on that section before we proceed?
No specific question, just going back to a couple of comments already made. Just, looking at the one that I'm kind of chairing, I'm curious if there's, and maybe Piper can send this or Maya, but if there is already some high level information or links already available on DOE's website. I'm pretty sure that DOE does a strategic plan and a SWOT analysis and maybe a pest analysis. If you already have some of those elements, just sending that to us, either hyperlinked or electronically, would be advantageous, just to kind of be able to review that in addition to what's been sent already.
Super. Thank you, Jen.
I have another question or comment, but under measuring and addressing job quality, I think the scope looks great. I guess one question I'm sitting with is, we ask how the DOE is currently measuring job quality, and then what's the expectation? I'm not actually clear, does the do we actually have a clear definition of job quality? And if that's built into the scope, but if not, I would just offer it should be.
Super, super. And it may be that those are the kinds of questions that the subcommittees document and express, and then if there is not a definition, for example, propose back. Super. Other comments or questions on that section?
No, it's just a comment, at least for mine, on the targeting of industry training needs. Pretty much are good. Our four key items with the topics are fine. I'll probably have some more feedback after I get with my committee tomorrow. Once we start massaging each level and kind of move forward with it. But so far, it's a great start for us.
Super. Okay. Any thoughts or comments or questions on the process that the subcommittees will need to work together to schedule your meetings, communicate with one another, communicate back and forth with the DOE, request resources, etc.?
I'm assuming we're just at liberty just to make our connections and move forward, or are those meetings that we need to have a DOE staff member present? I'm just asking.
Yeah. Maya and Piper, did you want to comment on that, or?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You are not required to have a DOE staff member present, but because you're reporting back to the whole committee, not reporting to us. But if it would be helpful to have us join your meetings, you can certainly reach out to me and I'll make sure that us or someone from the Labor Center is able to be present, because we would be able to help you with any sorts of data requests or things like that that you have.
Thank you.
I also just add that I am happy to help be in those meetings to add some insight that I have on some of the questions that were already asked, like a definition on job quality, to what extent there are existing resources to this question about a DOE workforce strategy. Those are the kind of things that if Piper and I are there, we have already some insights that might be helpful.
Super. And from the Labor Center perspective, it will be very helpful for the Labor Center team in supporting you in writing the report, to be involved in all of those meetings, or as many as possible. So we would ask that you call on us as well.
I have one last question about the committees. There does also seem to be overlap, probably in particular with the Department of Labor. What's the role of DOA to facilitate those connections or understand more about what other departments are doing around the same issues?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So potentially requests for support or information from DOE to make those connections with Department of Labor or other agencies in the board's charge.
Yeah, and I would probably call out both Department of Labor and Department of Commerce as the two big entities.
So this is related to which subcommittee? Is it the fourth one?
No, it's both. Definitely, like all of them, like all of those have workforce develop. All of those two other departments have massive workforce development investments.
I agree.
Maybe offline if we could talk about what that question is specifically. That could be something that maybe we have presentations or invite speakers from particular offices to join these meetings to provide presentations, but would just want to know what the question is in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, just to build on that for a moment, that makes sense to do. So, for example, I think some of us on this advisory board were part of the creation and defining of job quality that the Department of Commerce did, for example, and the Department of Labor did together. So then the question that I'm sitting with, this is just a tangible example, is like, how do we not duplicate efforts, or how do we look at what was created there and see what we can draw from as we think about here to have some consistency? So that would be an example.
Okay, great. On that question, I would just say DOE has pointed to principles that I don't know that they align 100% with those, but we're familiar with the principles that that Commerce and DOL put out. We've linked to the Good Jobs Initiative at DOL, their resources. The question that I would encourage the subcommittee to grapple with is, to what extent are we looking at job quality as an expectation in workforce development investments? And that's really the question we were trying to get at. And so it's not just what is a workforce development definition and how well does it align to the other agencies, but also, are we even using it?
Yeah, no, that I totally get that. I just wasn't sure if we were starting from a place of understanding of a clearer set of principles or definitions. So I get what we're really trying to get to here, but I was just using it as an example of like where we would want to make sure, to Amanda's point, there's some understanding of some of the other agencies and the work that's been done. But that's clear to me, Maya. Thank you.
And I think to that point too, that's even included in the statute. That's something that EWAB should consider, how DOE can interact with other agencies. So you're definitely asking the right questions there.
Great. Additional comments on scope and content?
Comment on the fourth subcommittee. That includes both identifying activities of the Department of Energy and measuring their effectiveness. Identifying that effectiveness sounds like a very challenging task, considering that federal programs are not always evaluated in a timely fashion for their effectiveness. So that's something that we're going to need some sort of work to identify that data for our subcommittee.
Great. So data requests and then identifying gaps in data and what to do about that.
Right. Thank you.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah, and going back to what I was stating earlier, Dan, that's why I was saying there has to be some type of roadmap that's internally done. I think most organizations have a scorecard, KPIs, whatever dashboard you want to call it, whatever is made available that would be advantageous for our group.
Super. Great.
Dr. Worrell, is the question about an energy strategy roadmap or an energy workforce development roadmap?
Both, if we can get it.
Okay, well, I will just say that the EWAB is really tasked with the roadmap for workforce.
Understood.
So it doesn't exist right now. Yeah, but
okay.
Those are tough questions.
Sure. Okay. And anything else on process? I note that in the materials, and I know that the conversation at the previous meeting and this meeting has encouraged cross participation, folks to participate in other committees. Are folks comfortable reaching out to committee chairs if they want to participate on a committee that they're not currently listed?
I have a question, I guess, along the same vein, Pamela. It seems as though the scope prioritization, so subcommittee 3, bullet point number 4, retraining people who have been displaced, older workers, younger workers, and underrepresented and marginalized populations, very much is reliant on subcommittee 1, combating barriers to energy employment. So what is the best way for us to collaborate as like separate work streams?
Absolutely. And maybe I throw that, maybe that's a great question for the committee, for all of you as board members and committee chairs to discuss how you want to work together on those cross collaborations.
I wonder if we could, just looking at all of the scopes outlined against each subcommittee, identify where there is intersection, and then figure out how to, on each of those points, come together. And maybe that's a shared meeting at some point. Maybe there's like, one group starts part of the work and hands it off, but it probably differs, according to each intersection. But I think that there's probably several instances of that.
And Deanna, I was just going to say, is that something that you might propose for the next group to be an agenda item, on the next public meeting?
Yeah, and I'm happy to take a stab at looking at where I see that. I'm sure others are willing to do that as well. But yeah, I think that would be a great point to revisit in the next meeting.
And then also, I said maybe the chairs could schedule a meeting together, because just schedules are tight. For example, the targeting one that I'm over on that situation, obviously, in some aspects, I view it as race. You know, when 70% of the electricians and manufacturing sector are white male, then there is there's a racial component to it too. So, which may not go into combating barriers, but some of those barriers are preventing women to get into the sector of childcare and so forth. So, yeah, we definitely look at and the research, what research is overlapping in those sectors. But I think maybe roundtable chairs, because there is some intersection between all four. But there's also some very clear sections that we do need to do some work on that we need to bring forward to the committee on a short timeline.
Super. So I'm going to propose that we move into the report plan, if folks are okay with that. Does that work for the board members? Okay. And what's presented, I think, in the document is one way of thinking about getting the materials that you need into a form that you can use to develop the report. I throw that open for discussion then. Does this structure that is presented in the report plan make sense in terms particularly of the tasks of gathering information and then analyzing that information? Much of the discussion that you just had today, so that you can develop your findings and then from there developing the strategy proposals.
I think this is a good outline overall. I was wondering if there's a way to share resources, because I imagine that some of the information will have, spread across the different subcommittees in terms of just like assets, reports, data, et cetera. So is there a place that we can house materials collectively, maybe under each subcommittee, just so that there's like full transparency and awareness? Maybe
Great
through
question.
Berkeley.
We can certainly look at that. And we can also, we'll work with Department of Energy to make sure that we're staying within any requirements for that. And any comments, Piper and Maya, on resources and process for that sort of data sharing or information sharing, I should say, housing that?
I think we're happy to facilitate whatever the members and the chairs feel is the best process. Yeah.
Super. And we'll look at.
I also thought the idea of the chairs meeting to coordinate and, move their shared objectives forward is a really good one. And thank you, Andrew Reamer, for the resources you've been putting in the chat. Just Dr. World, these are a lot of the speak, I think, to your question.
Super. So offline, the Department of Energy team and the Berkeley Labor Center team will work to come up with a proposed repository where things can be shared. Okay. Other comments on that report plan sort of broad structure?
Pam,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the topics in the report plan, would you all envision that actually be the structure of the report?
I think that's a decision that the board would tell to us. I think that's one approach to take, but obviously it's your report, and perhaps as the subcommittees continue to do their work, other structures might emerge. But this could be a place to start. But again, this is your report. Okay. All right. Absent other comments, should we take a look at timeline? And we're actually staying on the agenda time frame. So yay us, or yay you, I should say. So the timeline that's in the document that was shared is that by November 20th, the subcommittee should come back to the full EWAB, prepared to report about the key questions of information that's needed. Again, a lot of the discussion today. Identifying potentially gaps that we asked for this and this was not available. So what do we do about that? And then the key objectives of their subcommittees. And that the timeline also proposes that by that date, subcommittees and members should begin compiling and identifying examples of models that DOE could pursue in their strategic work. And then by the December 12th meeting, the subcommittees would report back on your findings to key questions and sharing those example models. And then by that January meeting, proposed for late January, the subcommittees would then be able to share draft components of the report. Is that a timeline that makes sense to all of you? Or is achievable?
I would just jump in and say, I think it's ambitious, but I think it's a experienced group of individuals here who have already a lot of thoughts and expertise in the area. So it seems like we are up for the target.
Excellent.
Well, and also I think, DOE's done a good job of organizing us and providing some report writing resources who even joined for the first meeting. And, we're taking a lot of notes. So I think that's going to be really helpful as well.
So I'm just curious about the subcommittee meetings because, and not to call anybody out, I haven't gone to any subcommittee meetings yet. So November 20th seems like right around the corner. And I'm not sure if there's been a number of subcommittee meetings or not.
Manus Gerard, I've been trying to get my committee. Alice and I had a brief meeting last week. I think we're going to officially meet tomorrow afternoon. Hopefully everybody can make it. So I'm just starting, so myself.
My group has not met yet, but we will. You're not behind.
Yeah, ours has not met yet either.
And it may be that this discussion helps put everybody in a position to begin to move forward pretty quickly now. So any other thoughts on timeline or need to reach out to each other, resources to make those subcommittee meetings happen? And again, I would encourage you to include the folks from the UC Berkeley Labor Center so we can support you, and the Department of Energy as well in your meetings.
I just have a question about if there's standing subcommittee meetings that I would be interested in listening into, but I'm not part of that subcommittee. Is that option open?
I think that's a choice that you all can make and that the subcommittee chairs can make. And there may be some parameters around. I would ask Piper and Maya if there are any parameters around making those subcommittee meetings available for other board members so that they don't violate any public meeting rules.
Yeah, there's no parameters as long as it's not a full meeting of all the EWAB members. It's left to the subcommittees of how they want to organize. So I think that's a good idea though for the chairs to meet and decide how to best go about that.
And would it make sense?
Feels like a information center would be very helpful, like where we can just post a schedule of meetings. So I think that's maybe part and parcel to the resources and data that we're collecting. If we can have some sort of infrastructure like that.
I will also
We
say
can
that
do SharePoint website.
That's great.
And once a chair is confirmed too for the whole EWAB, that will also be a helpful way for the data to be centered too.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that after this meeting, at your direction, the DOE team and Labor Center team will help figure out those things and share what sort of resource structure can support you based on these requests. Okay, great.
Happy to do that. I do think that with each subcommittee, there is a degree of analysis and research that each subcommittee should take on itself to find the answers to its specific and critical questions. You know, there's a lot of research expertise here.
Can I ask a question about the chair? You just mentioned that there will be an appointed chair of the committee, and I know you had written about that in the email. Can you give us that, and it maybe in the next couple of weeks, can you give us a sense, not if you can't say who it is, just like the type of person it is? Is this like somebody who has a role at DOE? Is it somebody outside of DOE? Like just to, is this like?
The chair is a member of the EWAB.
Oh, okay. It's somebody from this group.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Super. And following on Maya, your comments, I wonder if it may be the case that members of a subcommittee may reach out to other board members to ask them to participate in areas of particular expertise as they go through their analysis. So there may be proactive outreach to pull member expertise into the various subcommittee meetings, I would assume. Okay, with that, it's 9:40. Do folks have any final comments on this section? Okay, I'll turn it back to Maya and Piper for the next piece.
Great, thanks. Okay, as I mentioned, an objective of today's meeting is to help EWAB members develop a deeper understanding of how DOE leverages the National Lab. So we have 3 presentations. Our first presenter, Derek Passarelli, was recently appointed as the Principal Deputy Undersecretary for Science and Innovation, which is in the S4 wing of DOE. Derek most recently served as the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energies Golden Field Office Director, overseeing the critical operations and support functions in Golden, Colorado that are key to fulfilling EERE's clean energy mission, including management and oversight of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. The overall purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of what the national labs are and how they interact with DOE. I will share that you should feel free to put questions in the chat, but we'll also have a few minutes for questions after Derek's presentation. So take it away, Derek.
Thank you, Maya. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. And can you hear me okay, Maya? Okay, great. Thank you all. So I'm going to talk to you today about the National Laboratories. I'm going to make this quick and painless for you. For some of you, it may be old hat, but if you really look back to, gosh, it's been now 84 years. You're talking about August of 1939 when Albert Einstein, at the prompting of a colleague, writes a letter to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and says, hey, there's this potential for a bomb that could occur, and they were looking at World War II, and they were concerned about what were the ramifications of that. That really is the origin of the Department of Energy. And if we go back that far, and what was called the Manhattan Engineering District, for those of you that saw the Oppenheimer film, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't, it's a great way to look at the history of what eventually became the Department of Energy. The concept behind this, and we can go to the next slide, is that the private sector is better situated to do advancements in research and science than the federal government. So what we saw during the Manhattan Project, and then as we evolved into the Department of Energy in the 1970s, were that we created government-owned, contractor-operated entities that operated under what we call M&O contracts. So GOCOs, management and operating contracts. They operate DOE facilities. And and we're going to get into this, but there's 17 national laboratories. 16 of them are government-owned, contractor operated. We do have one, the National Energy Technology Laboratory. NETL is a go-go because it's government-owned and government operated. The distinction being that the employees of NETL are federal employees. But for the vast majority of the DOE National Laboratory structure, these are entities that are usually they're single-purpose entities. They steward and our national laboratories, and then we oversee them as DOE. Just to give you a sense of the number of percentage of folks who are non-federal employees in DOE, we have over 100,000 employees. I don't know what the latest figure is, but it's well over $100,000. About 88% of those employees are not federal employees. Those are contractor employees, with the vast majority of them working at the National Laboratory complex here. So it's really a significant investment in this. And so the way that we work with them is they manage them, they operate them, we oversee them, and we work with them to really get technologies out into the marketplace to do a variety of areas. If we pop to the next slide, I think you can see all over the country where these laboratories are. For the Undersecretary for Science and Innovation, we're responsible for 14 of the 17 labs. That includes all of the Office of Science laboratories, as well as the Applied Office laboratories. That's the middle category under other DOE labs. And then you have the NNSA laboratories, the 3 of them that make up the 17 national laboratories within the complex. So when you look at this, you can see a significant portion throughout the United States. A number of laboratories here have multiple campuses. And so what we're trying to do is to work together to achieve a number of the missions across the DOE space. The DOE space is so vast. Some of these things you may not be familiar with. DOE participated in the mapping of the Human Genome Project, the artificial retina. I could go on and on about the number of things that DOE has participated that you may not be familiar with, only because of the use of our high performance computing. We have the most powerful high performance computers in the world. And as we poise to get ready for the advancements in artificial intelligence, Department of Energy is going to play a central role, as announced yesterday by the president in an executive order. So if you look through the complex, you can see the laboratories devoted to Office of Science. I think I might have heard that Justin Fontaine, is that right? Is he on later today or not? I'm not sure. But anyway, you can see the activity that goes here. And again, I can speak to the applied offices. The National Energy Technology Laboratory originally grew out of the Fossil Energy and Carbon Management Office, or formerly known as the Fossil Office. We have the Idaho National Laboratory, which is really started out devoted to nuclear activity, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is devoted to energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies. So you can see that there's the whole gamut of DOE, the whole spectrum of DOE operations in the National Laboratory Complex. And, you know, we find it's a quite successful model. It is unique to DOE, the M&O approach to things, but it's a great way to get technologies out into the marketplace. I think I'm going to stop there, and probably there'll be more questions there. Just wanted to give you a very brief overview of what the laboratory complex is, and happy to answer any questions.
Derek, a question from Dan Marshall.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes, a question. So we have a chart, a listing of all the various DOE programs that are operated by the department. How do those programs relate to the structure of the national labs? Is a particular program located in one or more national labs? How does that fit together? What's the intersection there?
Yeah, so typically a DOE departmental element that's responsible for a program will take advantage of the skill sets of multiple laboratories. Some laboratories have specific skill sets that can apply to that. You know, I'll use ERE as an example, though. If you talk about wind energy, you'll see a lot of NREL, but you'll also see a lot of Sandia. There's great expertise there. If you talk about a number of the other complexes, the NNSA labs, very, very well versed in nuclear security type of activities. So I wouldn't say that these programs are housed in the national labs, but they are central players to those particular programs. But for the vast majority of programs, they're bringing to bear multiple national laboratory skill sets.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Derek, I was curious if this captures transitions. Like I know here in Augusta, Aiken, NSSA is coming and really moving their operations more here with some of the pit productions. Is that, are those transitions, are they captured anywhere? Maybe obviously not in this format, but can you give us a one pager on some of those activities?
Sure. So what we're starting to see is the expansion of certain capabilities to other offices. So even though a particular facility may not rise to national laboratory status, if I recall, the last I checked, I think we have over 83 sites throughout the DOE complex. So what you're going to see is it's not just a national lab. And again, a lot of these are the offshoots of a national laboratory campus. And again, we are expanding in, as you mentioned, to Aiken. We've got new campuses in Alaska. We're starting to see, if we're dealing with the circumpolar region, and there are other sites such as the Arctic Energy Office is now located in Alaska. And we also have NREL Alaska out there. So yes, a number of these facilities throughout the complex are affiliated with a national laboratory, or they stand independently that support the DOE mission. And yeah, we'll have to see if we can get another one that really captures all of those sites that are going on, because they're very central. You're talking about Aiken, it's incredibly central to the department's mission.
Do each of the labs have an education and training function as part of the labs? And if so, is it centralized? Is it standard, or does each one do its own thing? And what like what age groups or what parts of the continuum does it cover?
Yeah, you know, it's good that you mentioned that. I had the good fortune to be at a meeting recently, I think, with the diversity and equity and inclusion officers throughout the laboratory complex. So each lab has their own, whether it's education, DEIA, a number of different folks, but they try to collaborate as a network with DOE headquarters to implement programs. So I think we take into account that there are specialized needs for particular communities. And so it's not a one size fits all, but they're tailored to the communities in which they operate. But yes, there is a network across the complex for education officers, DEIA officers, a number of different programs where these laboratories will connect. There are entities that operate more than one national laboratory, so they have their structures as well. So for example, I look at the Battelle Corporation, has a number of labs. The University of California system operates a number of labs, and then there are a number of players involved in multiple national laboratories, either on their boards or serving in some capacity. So yes, it is a network. Originally, the way that the labs came out, they were decentralized by design, but the idea was that you would create this connective tissue.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, I see some good. Yes, there's a shout out for NETL, the Regional Task Force Initiative. So folks, please check out some of the comments in the chat. Any other questions folks may have for me?
I have a question. I don't know if you shared this, but is there a top line figure about how much funding flows from DOE to the national labs?
I didn't share that. You know, that might be a little harder. Let me tell you why. If you talk about the $34+ billion of annual appropriations, we just got another $100 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law, also known as IIJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act. So on top of our annual appropriations, we're now dealing with about $100 billion. Some of that money is flowing through the national laboratories. For example, we just announced the hydrogen hubs. While those entities that were the recipients of that funding, the prime recipients, are not the national labs, our national labs are actively engaged in that funding. So it isn't just the money that we annually send to them under annual operating plan, but they also are allowed to compete for funding under our funding opportunity announcements. So it's always a moving target. And as of the passage of the Energy Policy Act of 2005, not only can they participate as sub-recipients under a funding opportunity announcement, they can also apply directly as a prime recipient. Plus, we can fund them through laboratory calls, which are competitive solicitations within the department to our national lab complex. So there's a variety of ways to get funding to them, whether it's through the annual operating plan, the laboratory calls, or participating in funding opportunity announcements. So it changes very much every year, but it is a significant amount of funding.
Great, thank you for that context. With that, thank you, Derek. That was a fantastic overview of a very complex topic. So we're grateful to have you join us today. We will share Derek's slides as well as the slides of other presenters after today's call. With that, I think we can move on to the presentation from Anthony Armali, Global Partnerships Manager and Regional Workforce Initiative Federal Coordinator at the National Energy Technology Laboratory, otherwise known as NEDL. As Global Partnerships Manager, Anthony pursues new international and domestic research and development collaborations on behalf of NEDL. He works with regional stakeholders to develop and promote workforce programs and link them to opportunities in the energy and advanced manufacturing sectors. So take it away, Anthony, and thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So as Maya said, my name is Anthony Armali. I lead the workforce development program here at NETL. We started this in 2017 for a couple reasons. Wanted to promote STEM in the workplace, contribute to the discussion on advanced manufacturing jobs and energy type jobs. And so we've done that, upskilling Americans for these types of opportunities. Our initiative is essentially place-based. We focus on the Appalachian region of the United States. NETL does a lot of work with fossil energy, carbon management technologies. We have 2 of our 3 labs located in Appalachia, one in Pittsburgh, where I'm based, and another in Morgantown, West Virginia. So moving forward in 2017, our initiative, took off, and all of these metrics that you see here were obviously zeroed out. Since inception, we've grown a significant stakeholder base, over 800, which represent over 4 different institutions and organizations. We put on different webinars. So in the past year, we've had over 1,500 different registrants to our webinar series. I'll talk about that a little bit more here momentarily. We put out a monthly e-note, which summarizes funding opportunity announcements, high-level newsworthy items coming out of our lab, any upcoming events, whether it's for NETL or some of our stakeholders. We have a workforce report that we put out in there. So that alone has over 300 subscribers to our monthly e-note. In the chat, I believe Otto had put in about our workforce, our RWFI website. If you click that link, you can see all of our webinars. We record them, edit them, and put them on our YouTube page, and then archive them onto that website. You can also, there's an opt-in button for our monthly e-note if anybody on this call would be interested in subscribing to that. Catalyzed over $1 million so far in energy and advanced manufacturing type funding. We're actually approaching over 2 million now. That could update that. Next slide, please. So how do we maximize this initiative? A couple ways: consistent, meaningful engagement with our stakeholders. We do that by having our webinars. So one of the most common webinars I put on is what we call an Energy 101 series. So we take a technical topic at NETL and introduce it at a very high level. So people that may not work in energy or in research can come and easily understand what it is that we do at NETL. Why is it important? What opportunities for jobs does that technology potentially have in the future? What types of skills might be needed? you know, in that type of career field. And we've had a lot of positive feedback from that. Other types of webinars include Energy Jobs Outlook. We partner up with the Office of Policy at Department of Energy and have them brief out the U.S. Energy and Employment Report that comes out every year. We've also pivoted recently to start promoting opportunities for any of our stakeholders that have some research that they're working on that aligns to the NETL mission. And so, for example, the West Virginia University recently joined our webinar and briefed on direct air capture and some of the work that they're doing with that. So we offer that opportunity for anyone that's interested in, and then there's alignment there. Do a lot of networking, go out, visit sites, visit stakeholders. Recently went to the University of Pittsburgh, met with them to catch up. Participated in the interagency working group on coal impacted communities, which was at Westmoreland Community College, I believe 2 Fridays ago. Flew down to Florida last week and met with Oak Ridge National Lab and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory on a project that we're working on under IEDO, which is the Industrial Efficiency Decarbonization Office. So we're doing a lot of networking and you know, just stakeholder engagement. We try to do some face-to-face every month because we feel like that's very productive and there's a lot of value in that. And we host a lot of visitors to the lab as well. I mentioned our monthly e-note. Welcome you to subscribe to that if you're interested. And then on that webpage, you'll also find archives to our webinars. Next slide, please. Just want to highlight a few successes that I feel that this initiative has, especially of late. The first one you'll see is related to training and community college advancement. To me, this is a super impactful program that we help broker. Our regional workforce initiative, I refer to us as an integrator. So in this success here was an integration of efforts between Department of Energy and the Appalachian Regional Commission. We said, hey, there's a need for advanced welding workforce training. Basically, advanced welding is taking new state-of-the-art materials that are corrosion resistant, lighter weight, cheaper, more durable, longer lasting, things like that, and implementing new welding techniques into those types of materials. So the Department of Energy said, hey, we'll offer $500,000 to ARC. Would they match anything? And ARC's federal co-chair said, absolutely, we'll match another $500,000 to make the total amount $1 million. ARC put out the request for proposals, and there were 5 awards across Appalachia. They all went to either a community or technical school. There were more women than ever that enrolled in those programs, in 3 of those 5 programs than they've ever had before. This training was tied to a good paying job in welding, high in demand, you know, upon completion of the program, which I believe just in the spring, that program was wrapping up. And so we've had conversations about, you know, potentially a workforce initiative 2.0, and we've kicked around some different ideas. Do we do another advanced welding, or do we maybe pivot to something else? So those discussions are ongoing. But to us, that was a very impactful collaboration. A couple others real quick here. The Regional Advanced Manufacturing and Energy Innovation Group. So this is a group effort regionally. We had our kickoff meeting in Pittsburgh in 2019, and there were basically 5 themes that came out of that meeting. It was a listening session to our region where we listened to what are some concerns they have. Some things that were brought up were, well, how do we get through the red tape of working with the government? How do we find out about funding opportunities that are out there? Things that maybe you take for granted as a national lab, but it was good to hear that. So what we did as a follow-up was we put together 5 different themes, 5 different meetings with these same folks, and we made each meeting a new theme based on what we heard at that meeting, and then we addressed it directly, and then build it out from there. So I've mentioned this as a success because we finished that initial engagement, and now we're saying, well, how can we do this? How can we mimic this for other areas? So we're saying maybe new focus groups or special topics, possibly around hydrogen. Somebody mentioned earlier hydrogen hubs and direct air capture technologies or carbon management technologies. So having these little pockets of stakeholder engagement, not only just in our region, but we think this could be replicated across the country, and bringing in stakeholders from universities, academia of all levels, really, the national lab in the region, industry, and having these open discussions and how can we work smarter and better together. Next one was, you know, just university engagement. University of Pittsburgh, we partner with them all the time. Carnegie Mellon University, West Virginia University. These are regional big universities that we partner with. Last year, Pitt put together this applied data-driven methods grad certificate program. NETL helped them to advance that. We wrote a letter of support. We've offered different marketing opportunities for them. And again, this is a workforce development program to help people that maybe are stuck in a career that's really not going anywhere or low paying. This is an opportunity for them to have computer IT, if you will, training that's paid for, and of course linked to a very good paying job that's much in demand. We also offered at the end of the program to host a career day at NETL to bring in folks that would be interested in hiring these folks. So there's just a quick snippet there on partnerships we've had with a regional university, and then engagement with labs. So we have had a few of these in the past year. One of which is this Technology Commercialization Fund Award for minority serving institutions. Brookhaven National Lab was the lead. NETL is a partner, and we're trying to bring in students from minority serving institutions, tie them to a 10 to 12 week summer internship at the lab, where there would be lab IP that they could work on developing further into a ultimately commercialization. It would bring awareness to the MSI programs. It would get these students connected to the national labs and learn more about how the labs work, and then of course developing these technologies further. We think this will be a very impactful program for these students. So that's getting ready to kick off here soon. We just found out about the award in the last couple months. I have a few others.
Anthony, I have to jump in
Sure.
to keep us on time.
Yeah.
Any high-level questions or critical questions from the audience for Anthony before we move to the next speaker?
No, this is Gerard. Anthony, I'll probably talk to you more on offline, but I really like what you all are doing. I think some of this may work in the targeting thing that we're trying to do, how to expand it. I think Amanda and others kind of familiar back from the trade adjustment community college and career training program, so the TAC days. And we talk about phase 2 of this may be something we could do just for the energy sector. So some of the sector strategies you put in place are very promising. So I'd love to talk to you more offline.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I had more slides. I'll just wrap this up really quick. This is the only model that we're aware of in the national lab system that has this external workforce development type initiative. So Gerard, I'd be happy to talk to you about what we've done. I have a lot more successes, but I just didn't have enough time apparently. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll share contact information so folks can follow up offline. Thank you, Anthony, for your presentation. Our next presentation is from Elizabeth Doris, also known as Liz. Liz is the director of the Joint Institute for Strategic Energy Analysis at the National Renewable Energy Lab, also known as NREL, focusing on collaborative approaches to the most pressing challenges to the clean energy transition. With NREL since 2005, Liz Doris is the founding laboratory program manager for state, local, and tribal governments, which aims to support development of efficient, affordable, equitable, and resilient energy systems. The program primarily supports the U.S. Department of Energy's Weatherization and Intergovernmental Program, the Office of Indian Energy, and the Energy Transitions Initiative. So please take it away, Liz.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will be relatively quick. I am super thrilled to be here. One of our forward-looking areas in the Institute, which is a university partnership, which I'm happy to talk about, but I'm not here to talk about today, is the area of workforce. And one of the things we are really trying to do with clean energy workforce is identify, in a river that's already moving with so many great people already in the field and really like thinking about this, how can the National Lab and in particular NREL, but in general national labs really engage and provide meaningful usefulness. So I'm very much, as a consumer, looking forward to your report. You can go ahead and skip to the third slide. There are some references in there from, and I don't know if Justin is going to be here, but there are some Lab Operations Board resources links on that previous slide that we were talking about that a little bit earlier that I think are very helpful. in getting to know your labs. So I'm with NREL. I'm going to try to do a little broader representation. And I don't know if Derek is still here, but I will say that if you ask 17 national labs what they're doing on workforce, they will give you a Googleplex of answers, one with 100 zeros after it. And so it is really difficult to consolidate that into like an 8-minute presentation, but I'm going to try to do that. I just wanted to mention on this slide that we've alluded to it a little bit in Derek and in Anthony's presentations, that the labs see their role in 2 different ways here. One is sort of this place-based regional impact, right? Which is around like workforce development and, you know, regional benefit of creating ecosystems, in our case of clean energy, because that's what we do at NREL. And, but other labs do other things, right? And then also from a national perspective, the impact of our research missions, right? So like those are both place-based, but, you know, we might be doing work in Los Angeles, or, you know, we have Savannah, or we have Oak Ridge is doing work in Florida, but they're also doing work in Alaska, right? So those types of things where we're doing research in places will come into play when we start to talk about workforce research. So you can go to the next one. Okay. So one of the things that I do at NREL is I support the National Lab Directors Council, which is the group of 17 national lab directors, and you can go to nationallabs.org. That's their website. We're phasing that out, but it's there now. And they started in 2016 to pull together common resources across the laboratories. So the second bullet down below gets at a question that someone asked Derek earlier, which is really about how that execution and coordination happens. So there are subcommittee groups that are run by staff, like myself. I'm the chair of one of these groups right now. They rotate through, and that is where we try to share best practices and align on maybe common programming and really try to think about how we can work better together. In the case of workforce, and this is something that I don't think will surprise anyone, there are, let's see, 5 different committees at least that touch this topic of workforce. So there's sort of also a like meta subcommittee where we try to think about how we can work better together across this set of workforce challenges. I think that the reason we have that type of background is because of the, you know, our missions, as Derek talked about, are really tied to the Department of Energy's technology R&D mission. And so when we have cross-cutting items, we have to set up additional structures to provide supports to those. And I think I would characterize it as emerging. We have several old programs that have been around a long time that I'll talk about in just a second. But the coordination and the collaboration pieces, the sort of strategic approach piece, is I think something that I would characterize as a scientist as emerging. So, and that sort of gets at the first bullet, which is everybody has their own programs. But we sort of have started thinking about the programs in 3 different ways: our own workforce, the STEM workforce, right? And then the energy workforce and what's going on with the energy workforce in terms of analysis. And you'll see here that I have the regional workforce development effort from NETL, which is, I think, I agree with them, the only one in the national lab system that is that regional effort within that STEM workforce delivery. I think that I'm glad Anthony's here because that explanation was not as rich as what his explanation was. I think a lot of labs would love to have something like that. At NREL, we have been working with the EDA grantees who are doing clean energy workforce development. They're of the 37 Build Back Better grantees. That's not what that grant ended up being called, but I think you know what I'm talking about. That of the 37 million Better Jobs, Better Communities, I think, grants. Of the 37 winners, 2 of them were explicitly focused on clean tech. And so we have been working with them as a like sort of collaboration tool to get at some of this regional work, but we ourselves don't have one, and I don't think another lab does. So you can go to the next, or that animation here. I'm going to talk about each of the 3 of these. For our lab workforce, this is just some examples of what we're doing. I won't get into all of them. They're all linked. If you get the slides, they all have links. The top one is just, we have all of the labs, I think now, have a diversity page. This is NREL's up at the top there, that looks at different cuts of the diversity of the actual laboratory workforce. Below that is PNNL's, Pacific Northwest National Labs, list of ERG groups. So that's about inclusion within the laboratory and thinking about that. So we have data reporting and inclusion. We also have training for our scientists. The OTT Energy I-Corps program is something that many of our laboratories participate in to help our workforce understand what is needed in the industry and also increasingly in communities, right? So impact from communities and public benefit as well, which intersects with workforce. And then we have a ton of different internship programs. We run, I think all the labs run the GEM internship program. We have 2 lab people as the co-chairs of that organization right now. And so we have that. And then I also wanted to talk down here about, this is a picture of someone from the STAR program. That's an NREL program, but many of the labs have emerging programs that do more wraparound services for undergraduate, graduate, and postdoctoral services. So this one not only provides housing for the students, that's philanthropically funded, braided funding, but it also provides a cohort-based model, and it provides time and effort for the professors to get to know, and it's specifically for MSIs, but again, to get to know the research scientists to create the kind of academic lineage that has historically driven hiring at the national labs. You can go to the next one. That's just a couple examples. There are tons of them. I'm not doing my colleagues any justice. The next one.
I want to just jump in here to keep us on time. If you could,
1 minute.
we should move into the public comment portion soon. So if you could give the most important points, and then we'll see if there are any questions, but we did have a few other items in the agenda today. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not going to go into our K through 14 programming. These are all linked. They are all mentioned. I will say that one of the interesting things about these programs is that they are tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people getting trained, right? These are huge, large-scale programs, and I think that's a really interesting thing to remember. A lot of our other work has 8 or 10 evaluations, that kind of thing. So you can go on to skip 2, and that's the last, the energy workforce. One area where I think we really are emerging, and I have the workforce initiative here too, is around analysis for clean energy or for energy workforce. I want to flag specifically the STEM Opportunity Landscape Project. That's an Argonne project that lists out all the STEM training in the region with Argonne, which is a pretty amazing set of work that they worked with high school teachers and collegiate teachers and community college teachers to put together. We also do a great amount of workforce analysis. So what are the impacts of workforce of our different R&D technologies on workforce? And we're starting, and this will wrap up here, we're starting to get at questions around to what extent do we want to think about workforce as a limiting factor for R&D development? And that is what we're working on. Happy to talk more.
Fantastic. Thank you, Liz. Any questions for Liz or comments that you'd like to raise to, maybe lead for some offline discussion? Okay, with that, I think we can move. Thank you so much, Liz and Anthony and Derek. I think if we do have time after the public comment portion, perhaps we can turn back to some, engaged discussion with the presenters. But with that, I think we should turn to the public comment portion.
Thanks, Maya, and thanks to everyone for the great presentations today. I think they really framed the national labs well for the members for more discussion. We do have one person who reached out about public comment. So I will turn it over to Andrew Reamer to speak for up to 3 minutes.
Great, thank
Andrew,
you.
you should be able to talk. Yep.
Piper, I had a lot to tell you, so I just put it all in the chat, almost all of it. I'm also a colleague of Dan Marshall's at GW, and a research professor at George Washington University in public policy, and focus in particular on how to make labor markets work better so America can compete in global markets. And so energy, of course, is a key part of that. So I live, eat, and breathe this stuff. If you think about the data resources that the board needs to come to a report, the analysis to create the report, and putting the report out and having impact, for the first 2 things, basically, there's probably nothing that you're doing that someone else isn't already doing in the federal government. And so if I were you, I would encourage you, and that's why I put the stuff in the chat, to make use of other people's time and energy. Don't recreate the wheel. Think horizontally, not vertically. I was a little concerned with the scope of the subcommittee tasks, in that it only at the last minute did someone put in, let's talk to people outside of DOE. If you don't talk to people outside of DOE, I think the odds of creating a report that no one reads goes up substantially. So I'm happy offline to take questions on any of the resources. Piper, I found Piper 6 months ago. She spoke on a panel that I put together on the subject. The final thing I'll say is, in which I did not put in the chat, there is a group led by the Loan Programs Office at DOE to facilitate a public-private U.S. clean energy industrial strategy. And of course, workforce is key to that. And so Third Way, the think tank, is convening quarterly meetings in which about a quarter of the people are from DOE. Vanessa Chan from the Office of Technology Transitions, the Loan Programs Office, Jonah Wagner, and a new addition, the secretary, Granholm, hired Kate Ringness to actually create a U.S. clean energy industrial strategy that the secretary can announce. Of course, there's going to be a workforce component to it. Kate's been on the job for 5 weeks. So I'm happy to connect Piper to Kate. She was at our meeting a week ago Friday. So you want to get in sooner rather than later in inclusion. And the final thing is, DOE has been incredible in its ability to create strategies regarding clean energy technologies, far and away better than any other department around industrial strategy. Where it's way behind is the basic stuff like the DOE strategic plan. If you look at the link I sent you, the last DOE strategic plan was created in 2014. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm available to Piper and Dan and any of you offline.
Thanks, Andrew. If you want to share your email in the chat, and then members can feel free to reach out to you. And I appreciate all those comments, and we'll turn it back over to Maya to wrap up the meeting.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, we have 10 minutes left, and I thought it'd be great to use some of this time to share reflections on what we learned today. What is something that surprised you about DOE's national labs? What are some areas about which you are most interested in learning more?
It's Chris Levesque. I guess I can go first. I've worked with the national labs a lot, so none of this surprised me too much. And I'm thinking back to Bettany's comments that, with the reorganization of DOE last year to include Undersecretary Crane's group, now there's a big craft labor component to DOE's workforce planning. So for years, DOE's done a very good job, I think, managing the scientific workforce. And we heard a lot about that today. Are we going to spend some time in the group delving, into similar programs for craft workforce?
Chris, can you define what you mean by craft workforce?
Hourly.
Okay.
Hourly, because the national labs, if you work with them, are very postgraduate, PhD emphasis. Sure, they have some craft workforce in the labs, running the facilities, but just if we think about the whole clean energy transition, workforce demands, there's going to be this huge increase in demand for craft labor.
Chris, I'll quickly speak to it from the Augusta Aiken lab. We're doing a lot right now. We have 2-year programs that specifically are graduating techs to support scientists, and we have a lot of mechatronics welding students who are working at the lab. I think the question that I have is, what is that on scale? I know what it is in Augusta, but I don't know what it is at Los Alamos. And then what is that national demand, and what can we do either from the community college, technical college, locally to partner with those organizations, or we have a lot of unions, IBEW folks who possibly could be circulated throughout some of these labs to fill some of those jobs. I just think that people may not know that they exist, and they may not know what the quantity or demand is across the country. But I do agree with you. It's a growing opportunity. I know in Augusta, they're begging us to graduate more technicians.
Liz, I saw your hand up.
I was just going to say that I agree with that characterization. Is almost exactly like there's no there's a lot of opportunity that people I think just don't have the correct networks. I was sort of getting at that with this conversation even about MSIs, but I would say that we have NREL has seen a lot of success, and I think other labs have too, at partnering for funding opportunities with consortia of community colleges. We're doing a lot of like development of curriculum. They do the development, we provide the expertise, they do the curriculum, sort of with community colleges and increasingly with like high schools in diploma programs. So there's increasing, I would say, not totally organized.
Yeah, for me, it was an eye opener. Obviously, I've been based in Louisiana for most of my career, working in petrochemical and energy. And so, like around Texas, Louisiana, there's kind of like there's a black spot. So I'm just curious the history of that. But doing my national work now, it's good to see now the leveraging. And I'm not quite sure exactly how many community colleges are leveraging. I hear from some of my advisory board members they are doing some work with labs, but at scale, like Jermaine has mentioned, I'm not sure there's some scaling opportunities.
I think some people have started talking about this a bit, but what are some ways you think DOE can more effectively utilize national labs to achieve its workforce development priorities?
So Maya, I have a question. I was just like digging through the documents because one of the differentiators for me and how I've been thinking about this is really like real-time need. And it seems like so much of the National Lab is like future focused scientist and like perspective. And so like going back to like Chris's point about craft workers, I think that like that real-time issue is really prominent in the work that I do. But what's the time scale that we're looking at for this committee in terms of what like the workforce we're looking to project out on?
So that's a great question. And we always go back to what Congress said that EWAP should be. And in that statute, they basically called this group the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board. So I would take that into consideration. And also the fact that it said current and future energy needs. So as the EWAB develops recommendations, it I think is worth thinking about addressing both current needs and how DOE, is positioning itself and funding programs and shaping programs to meet current needs, near-term needs, but also thinking big picture and boldly about those future needs. Does that help answer it? Just you all are called the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board.
So we should be thinking about a century is basically what you're talking about.
I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to because I mean, I think someone mentioned whether this report will be read. It will be read by the secretary, and the secretary will, there's a timeline that there's a response. So it's certainly going to be read. And so with that, I would be thinking about what's most important. Maybe it's not 2095, but maybe it's 2050.
As a former Keynesian instructor, in the long run, we'll all be dead. So I think there's a combination of some short run things that we need to present to the administration as well as the long run. But one thing I think would be helpful, again, I know the Augusta market, Aiken, very, very well because we partner with them daily. It would be interesting to me, Maya, maybe we can frame it this way. It might help us to deliver a workforce identity is, what's happening in Alaska? I have no idea. I think we got a synopsis of that today, but just getting an understanding of what is their current workforce there, what is their mission? Because like in Augusta, our mission is mostly plutonium recycling. So I know what we do here and what our long-term plan is for this site, but I don't know what the plan is outside of Los Alamos for those other 15. So having an idea of like what are their core missions. I know that they talked about the integration and they're sharing resources and data, which is cool. But if I knew which each one is, specifically targeted to do, what their current workforce is, understanding, what is their current labor market in that area, what is retirements looking like in the next 10 years, like that will start to unravel a few things. And then we can do some projections and say, okay, if we project that out over 30 years, this pit production is going to require another 50 years of investment. How many people will we need to be able to do that effectively over 50 years? What is the expense? What is the education outcomes required for them to be able to have the talent there? So that's the way I'm putting it in my mind, because again, we're working with our local organization, and they pretty much tell us, our mission for the next 35 years is pit production. That's what we need you to build a workforce around. We need X amount of these folks, but I just don't know what that is at the other national labs. And I think if we can get that, that would help us to kind of frame the argument, and then also do some gap analysis around what are those challenging areas that kind of meet those needs. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that would help me to put that in a framework to answer the question.
So I understand wanting to have a baseline of what they're doing or what they say their priorities are. But I would also say that just remember that you're able to also say what they could be doing, big picture. So I know we're at time, so I'll pass it to, well, first, does anyone have any closing questions that are urgent? Missy.
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment. I think to the point that Dr. Worrell was making about we all are bringing some degree of a scope of what we can offer to this board. And it's my understanding that we will each draw upon the resources we have available to us, whether that's peer networks, whether that's association partners, whoever it is that we work with, so that we can do our best in our due diligence process to make sure we're not just representing with our 14 voices, but those we have access to, and ensure that their voices are in this work product. Is that an accurate understanding? Are we all coming at this with that same approach of kind of who we're bringing to the party with us, perhaps behind the scenes? Okay.
Yeah, bring people to the party behind the scenes, but you all are the designated members, and that's what is the constraint, just to keep in mind. But if you have a team that can help you dig into some of these questions, that would be all the better. There are a lot of tough questions that can be pursued, and how you go about answering them is up to you.
I was just gonna say the questions are huge, and the opportunity and responsibility seem very significant. So I would imagine if we can each draw upon the resources we have available to us, I know I personally would feel more comfortable with my suggestions if I know they're coming from those that are practitioners on a more daily basis.
Thank you for that addition. That's great. So with that, I think because we're out of time, Piper, if you could wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And thanks for that suggestion, Missy. I'll just remind all of you too that you were selected as representative members of your various organization types and the different things laid out in the statute. So you can certainly bring the views of those groups that you're representing, and should, to the work that you're doing here. But just to close out the meeting, thank you for the productive conversation and presentations today. And I now adjourn the meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for November 20th. Thank you all.
Thank you,
everyone.